The fact that there was a live bullet on the set is mind-blowing.
Well, and the fact that they were practicing with live ammunition the day before this happened.
If they were out there with prop guns, which let's be clear here, prop guns, that's a misnomer. These are real guns.
Yeah, they're all guns.
As props. Yeah, they're real. But if they were out there with picture weapons, that's unbelievably negligent.
So if it came out that that's what was going on.
Yeah, you're starting to look at something that would be outside of the custom and practice of the industry, allowing people to go and freelance with the picture weapons. Yeah, that would be that would be problematic.
So I want to do something slightly different today. This will be the first interview that we have here on 5 Minute Critic. Why do this? Because the main question that I have on these videos is Alec Baldwin going to go to prison? Not what do I think, not what do you think. What are people in the industry of law actually seeing as how this is going to play out? Today we're going to have a guest, an entertainment lawyer coming on named Chris Wheeler. We're going to be asking him really all the questions that I get from you guys, the questions that I have, and it's really only talking about what are the legal implications for Alec Baldwin. Now, when we filmed this interview, this was right after he filed arbitration, pretty much saying that he did no wrongdoing at all, absolving him of wrongdoing. So we're going to start by talking through what does that actually mean? What is arbitration? What is he really trying to get when it comes to that? And then we're going to cover a bunch of things from the legal side, meaning what is his responsibility? What is the responsibility of the production? How are celebrities normally protecting themselves in these situations? And really, most importantly, what can we expect to happen next? So we have Bryan Jeansonne on this interview. He's the founder and owner of Lakeland Title in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He's also the host of the podcast In the Abstract, which is a Lakeland Title podcast, found everywhere that you listen to podcasts. And then Chris Wheeler, who is a shareholding attorney with the law firm Framework Law Group in Los Angeles. Again, he's the entertainment lawyer. All links are below for all of their information. Leave any questions or comments below, and thank you guys very much. So let's get to the interview.
We're here today to talk about the arbitration, really, but kind of any other legal questions that might come up in terms of the whole Rust shooting Alec Baldwin fiasco that's kind of dominated entertainment conversation for a good while now. Chris, what are some of, actually, could you actually start by giving us kind of a definition as to what arbitration is?
It's essentially like going to court, but instead of suing people, you file an arbitration and it's handled privately. So there are a lot of, but depending on your perspective, there are a lot of advantages or disadvantages to an arbitration. In the entertainment industry, agreeing to an arbitration is incredibly common because you want to keep things private. And the last thing you want to be known as is either A, a producer that sues their actors, or B, an actor that's a troublemaker and sues their producers or messes with them. So oftentimes you will see in a contract for whatever service in the entertainment industry that the parties are contractually agreeing to arbitrate their disputes rather than going in and filing it in court and it being public.
So in going through what was filed, I guess bird's eye view before getting into kind of more of the details of what's at play here, what is Baldwin essentially saying?
So he's saying a lot, and I have a lot to say about the arbitration, the complaint that's being filed. First, you hardly ever see these. The whole idea of it being private, generally there'd be a clause in the contract that you sign that you're arbitrating under that says that arbitration or the fact that we're even having an arbitration is confidential and shall not be disclosed. Apparently that wasn't at play in this one, and that's not a huge surprise. A big star like Alec Baldwin has leverage and is probably on an equal playing field with the producers of Rust. And so he's going to be able to get a more favorable arbitration agreement in place than a lot of other folks would. But the fact that it became public, I chuckled to myself when I was looking at some of the coverage in media on it and say, all the news reports saying, oh, we obtained a copy. Well, there's only one way you could have obtained the copy, and that's if Baldwin's attorney gave it to you. So Baldwin wanted this out there. I'd be shocked if he didn't. And the reason I say that too is because the plain Jane allegations of this complaint should have taken about 5 paragraphs to write. But this thing goes on for like 38, 50 something pages. I mean, a long
It's really
time.
long. It's really long.
Yeah, it's 38 pages. And they're going through the blow by blow of how the shooting happened and how much Baldwin cares and how much he had talked to the husband and the and the son of the woman. And
in the middle of looking at it, I honestly thought to myself, if we were to kind of make an adaptation of this, we could open it with like, Baldwin was born on the blah, blah, blah in 1940s.
Exactly. And in fact, they include excerpts from the script in the arbitration. That's ludicrous. None of that's necessary. So this thing was written to play in the media. It got filed, I think, right after he gave that just disastrous interview. And so this was largely to rehabilitate his image. He wanted to get at his side of the story. And there's a whole lot of what we would call irrelevant things that would just are relevant to the actual issue at hand here, which is really quite mundane and really boring and happens all the time. The whole thing was a PR move.
Is there a goal here to really get something settled, or is it just like you're saying PR?
No, there's absolutely, absolutely is a goal here. Baldwin is seeking indemnification from the production company. And what indemnification is it is a contractual agreement that's very common that says, if I do something to you, other contractual party, and what I did causes other contractual party to get sued, I am the one that has to pay. Now, in this situation, it's a little bit unusual because you have Baldwin playing kind of two roles with this production company. First, you have him as an employee, as an actor. That really isn't what this thing is about at all, because an employer, the production company, is responsible for what their employee does. So that would be clear if Baldwin were to, get sued himself as an employee, the production company would be liable. What really this is about, though, is Baldwin's other role that he played, and that was as an investor and a producer of the film. And under the production agreement, Baldwin had received this indemnification from the production company. So what he is trying to say at this point is, hey, what I did on the set, that wasn't my problem. I was following the production company's lead. Production company, you've agreed to indemnify me. So now that people are coming after me, you got to pay for me. That's what the suit is, or arbitration is really about for Baldwin.
The ball's in whose court right now? Like, what happens when something like this is filed?
So it generally will parallel a civil lawsuit. So with you can agree since it is all private, the parties to the arbitration can agree to alter the rules however the two of them see fit. So generally what would happen next is whoever this was filed again, whoever was served with this, which was the Rust Movie LLC and also Ryan Smith, another one of the producers, they will have the opportunity to file an answer to this complaint. If I were their attorney and filing the answer, it would just deny. Arguably, I'd try possibly to get several of these things struck because they have no bearing on the outcome of the case. That the script read this. What's bearing on the case is what was said in my production contract. That's all. I mean, that's all that matters. But they'll file an answer. At that point, they'll go into some sort of discovery. I can't imagine there will be much discovery here. They'll probably want to take depositions, maybe, but everybody, there's not a lot of debate about the facts, except for the unknown facts of how did the bullet get on the set. But, a woman got shot. She died. Baldwin was the one with the gun in his hand. It was on the motion picture set. It was during the course of the production. And now people are getting sued left and right. And then they'll go in front of the arbitrator and they'll argue like a court case. And then the arbitrator will eventually issue a written decision. And that will be that. And as members of the public, we will never find out what happens. If the only way we would find out what has happened would be if the arbitrator issues a ruling and then one of the parties doesn't abide by that ruling, you have the ability to then go into a real court with the arbitration decision and say, hey, Mr. Real Judge, would you enforce this agreement that will you enforce this decision of the arbitrator? That's the only way these decisions ever come public. It's not going to happen here. We will never know what happened.
Or if it accidentally gets leaked.
Well, somebody leaves it on the copy machine.
Well, it also seems like there's such, kind of like you were saying with the arbitration, it seems like there's so much of this is being cooked for being sent out to news organizations. You would kind of wonder, maybe, I don't know if that'd be something that, they want for the decision to be leaked.
It could be, but a lot of press on this doesn't do anybody any good, for certainly not Baldwin. But it doesn't do the production company and the others involved any good either, because it's very likely they could be just as culpable. So keeping this private, keeping it quiet is in everybody's best interest. And that's why they initially agreed to have an arbitration in the first place.
If the arbiter rules in favor then of Baldwin, essentially the Rust production company will be, I suppose, backing all of the fees that Baldwin's going to have to be going through with all these other lawsuits that are kind of in the works right now.
Yeah, so it'll be twofold. One, the production company will end up having to take care of Baldwin throughout whatever, all these lawsuits that are going on. And, he's getting sued by everybody under the sun, but also, and this is key, Baldwin will be indemnified for his defense remember, Baldwin owns part of the production company. He was an investor in the film. The production company was a special purpose company created just for this film, which is a very common practice to protect yourself from liability. But the production company itself was a one-off special purpose entity that was created for the purpose of this film. Baldwin owns some sort of a percentage of that under the financing agreement. So there's also the possibility that Baldwin will need, if there's a $10 million award against the Rust Movie Productions LLC, well, then who has to kick in and pay that? Well, the financiers, the LLC, generally are insulated from liability, but they're not when they're the ones that caused it themselves. And here you have an unusual situation where one of the owners of the company is also the one that created the peril. So you could see a situation where Baldwin is also trying to protect himself from his liabilities as an owner of the company.
His two roles do make that really, really strange, because you do have so many people some people will go full in on his capacity as an actor. He's holding the gun when it goes off. Did he ever have eyes on whether or not the bullet was, real, or if it was a dummy? And then you go down the chain of command. But then at the same time, even if you completely absolve him from that, he's still pretty much on the executive board here. You got to wonder what culpability. So could you speak to, in play of just someone who's holding the gun on the set, what's the level of, I guess you could, whether you want a responsibility, or I don't know if that's the right word, in something like this when it comes legally as to what's going on?
So legally, what happens on a film set is if an accident happens, the production company is the responsible party, period, full stop, and a discussion. They are the employer. These are employee-employee relationships. They're the employer. They are subject to OSHA. They are subject to just anything you would normally see in a workplace. No different from if they were running a restaurant, and somebody got burned with chemicals in the back of the restaurant, making up a mop bucket. No difference there. So the production company, they're the ones that are liable. They are the employer, period. Except in very limited circumstances, you can argue that the employee was acting outside of the scope of their employment. That's not going to happen here. If somebody was working on a movie set, they snuck off the set to go spend some time at their favorite strip club, they were drinking, and they beat up one of the girls. Even though you're an employee, you're so far attenuated from your actual responsibilities. That's not going to be something that would go back to the employer. That's not a play here. None of that's a play here. So the only way the production company could be absolved would be if somebody intentionally, criminally, recklessly took the gun, took all the bullets out of it, and loaded the actual bullet in there and decided they were going to commit a murder. But barring that, and I don't think anybody's alleged that this was intentional. I think there was a little bit of chatter that it might have been sabotage, but I think that was to put some spin on it in the media. I don't know. I don't think there was a saboteur. You don't kill somebody. You have to have a really depraved mind to decide I'm going to murder the cinematographer through Alec Baldwin by sneaking on a bullet. So I don't think that was what was going on. At the end of the day, so it was an accident. And for pure accidents, the production company is responsible.
You see that there are suits that, like, the armorer is mentioning Baldwin, and he's got suits that are mentioning the armor. So is all of this just kind of how do you interpret that? Because I see that and I'm like, so why are we looking for the one person that at the end of the day there's like a check mark and it's like there they are? Or like how are you supposed to interpret this?
It is going to be a spaghetti plate full of lawsuits. There's going to be suits, there's going to be cross suits, there's going to be counter suits, there's going to be, if you're into legal civil procedure, boy, have I got a case for you. This is going to go on for decades. This thing is going to take 10 years to get unraveled, to figure out who will ultimately respond. Oh, yeah. Twilight Zone movie, which happened in 1982, that took 10 years to get that thing fully resolved. For those unaware, that was a helicopter crash on the set of the Twilight Zone movie. It killed Victor Morrow and 2 other child actors in the middle of the night. And that was bad, really bad, and it actually resulted in a lot of reforms in the industry. So this thing's going to go on for forever. Insurance, with low-level people like the armorer, I'm calling her a low-level person. I'm sure she's a very nice person, but low-level in the extent of not going to have a lot of money in all likelihood. It could be wrong. But
Alec Baldwin could out, lawsuit her, for years.
Well, that was also my question. Is there insurance to cover these? Do these people have insurance for this? Because no one wants to sue someone personally. That just does not happen in the legal world. I know that's kind of shocking for people to hear, but you want to go after an insurance company. That's where the money is. That's who's going to pay out. And so are they covered for this? Do they have like we do in our legal practice? Do we have, errors and omissions insurance for producers and actors and things like that?
Brian, you're absolutely correct. There's 3 ways really that people insulate themselves from liability in the motion picture industry, and really every industry for that matter. The first are indemnity provisions. We've already talked about those, but an indemnity is only as good as the person who's paying for me is their ability to pay. So if, I have an indemnification from some company that just went bankrupt, well, now my indemnification is valueless. So indemnification is one way. The second way is through setting up LLCs, a company, and we see that at work here. They created that special purpose entity, that Rust Movie Productions LLC. So again, if you follow all the rules of an LLC, just like any business would have to, that's going to help to limit your liability. And indeed, LLC is short for limited liability company. It's the reason they created them. And the third way is it's the reason God created insurance, for those weird moments that just kind of happen, or those unfortunate moments. You mentioned an errors and omissions policy. Errors and omissions is that's generally a term of art within the entertainment industry. It has more to do with if I have a new rap song out and I didn't clear all my samples appropriately, and there's non-cleared sample, that will be my error. That's the kind of thing that E&O will generally cover. I don't know about this particular motion picture, but on a lot of them, your actors, actresses, your A-list talent will require the production company to add them as an additional insured and get a certificate of insurance and get an endorsement and all. And have $10 million of 10, 20, $30 million worth of coverage, $1 million. So there's definitely going to be money there. Your question also about going after the armorer and then how long these things are going to drag out for. Well, a lot of the cases, because in all likelihood, this person doesn't have a lot of assets, you'll go, okay, well, I'm the one going after her. I'll tell you what's the maximum insurance amount I can get? Okay, it's that amount. Great, done. And that'll be that. And so then the insurance company will write a check and the case will be over. There's no sense in going after more money that you may never be able to collect. So you settle it for insurance limits and move on. The interesting thing about this case is most of the people being sued and most of what's going on here, it all comes back to they were all employed by the same employer. They were all employed by the production company LLC. So it's interesting. That's who I wouldn't be suing the armorer. I'd be going after the LLC directly, her employer. So I don't know if it's bad lawyering or if, the only reason I could see the armorer being sued personally would be if the production company were saying, no, we get indemnity from her because it was her gross negligence. She acted so outside of the standard of care for a professional armorer that there is no indemnity. She has to indemnify us because she was really, really bad. But again, she didn't have any money, so there's no reason to do that. So it's weird that she's being sued. That's probably a another PR ploy.
And the way everyone talks about this, everyone always just asks, when is ... going to prison, essentially. And I feel like that's like a fun way to have a conversation about this. But in terms of like where is it with the DA keeps saying, well, we're waiting for charges. What's the real conversation to be having whenever, someone brings something like that up?
So the only people that are going to make that decision are going to be the district attorneys in New Mexico that are going to make that choice. If there's evidence of a crime, and for a prosecutor to charge a crime, they have to have a lot more belief in it than I do to have to be able to ethically file a lawsuit against somebody. They have to believe that they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. There's special ethical rules of our profession that apply to prosecutors that don't apply to anybody else. When did this happen? This happened just...
Yeah, it was October 21st. So, I mean, it's been almost no time.
Yeah, it's been 6 months. That's no time. For there to be criminal charges here, they're going to have to prove something special. So, murder is it's always incredibly difficult to prove. They would have to prove that somebody put the bullet into the gun with the intention of killing that woman, malice aforethought. Yeah. So they were going to do it really bad, and they were going to do it beforehand. That ain't happening. That ain't happening. That you're not going to prove that.
No. Unless there's a text message that says, don't worry, it'll be done by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning.
I hate her. I'm going to do it tomorrow. And I'm going to do it through Alec Baldwin. No.
Yeah, that only happens on Law and Order. That only happens.
Yeah. We're not going to have a Matlock, here. So we're not going to see a murder 1. Murder 2, again, for there to be a murder, you'd have to have somebody acting with such crazy disregard for human life that it's, again, depraved heart, makes you feel dirty. That's me. Well, I didn't mean to kill him, but I just pointed the gun at him anyway and pulled the trigger 5 times, but I wasn't trying to kill him. That it's so reckless, it's so dangerous. That's not here. I don't think you're getting a murder 2 unless somebody's really looking to make some news on this. The DA's running for re-election and desperately needs something. I don't know if you could get that. Manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter, no, that's not going to apply because you would need self-defense. There's no self-defense involved. But an involuntary manslaughter, maybe, but that's probably 3 to 6 years. If there was going to be arrest, I think it would have already happened, barring some kind of blockbuster evidence that we don't know yet. I will say, in the arbitration paperwork, which, keep in mind, this is a complaint. It's intended to be biased as all hell. That's why you hire attorneys. You're paying them literally to be to be biased. You are literally being paid to agree with your client. They posit an interesting theory that says that we got this box of ammunition that showed up on the set was apparently mixed of live and dummy rounds. If that's the case, then how those things got mixed, that's an interesting theory. That could be involuntary manslaughter, because that's really, really, especially it was sold by a props company that obviously has experience selling dummy rounds to the motion picture industry. So they would know why it's important that live rounds wouldn't be mixed in. That could be very interesting, but barring something like that, no one's going to know.
Well,
you're going to have all these civil suits flying around. There are probably going to be some depositions. So someone could say something in one of those depositions, or many of them, that would trigger some sort of criminal case. That happens quite often, where someone's in a sworn deposition and they say something and, oh, there you go, you incriminated yourself, we're going to file charges now. I mean, that could happen if they go into these depositions without some sort of immunity agreement, or the case definitively dropped by the DA.
That's true, but it's not like we're going to bring the charges. We're going to go report what you said under oath to the district attorney, and then they can choose to bring the charges. So, and all these people are going to be lawyered up, come from the wazoo out. I mean, that's why we're fighting over indemnification right now, is who has to pay for all these lawyers.
If we're talking about something like involuntary manslaughter, and you have someone who fired a firearm that resulted in someone being killed, and then they say, shit, I didn't even check the gun. Like if involuntary manslaughter applies, I'd be worried it applies here.
Yeah, I would too. But the key thing for an involuntary manslaughter is it has to be grossly negligent too. So if I set up, if I'm going to start shooting cans off of my windowsill with my 22, and I go outside, I check, no one's around, I live out in the middle of the country, that might be just fine. If I'm in a New York City high rise and I decide to start popping off some shots with my next door neighbor and I set up my tin cans against the wall, then that's probably negligent. So you can have very similar facts and you just change one a little bit. On a movie set, that's why in this arbitration, which it's frivolous here, not frivolous, it's superfluous, it's not necessary. But Baldwin goes on and on and on about the usual practice on a motion picture set is for the armorer to check the gun. Once they hand it to the cast member, if the cast member opens the barrel to check it themselves and the armorer is not looking over their shoulder, you have to stop everything. Only the armorer can declare a gun clear. The cast member can check it themselves, but they must do it in the presence of the armorer. If the gun is ever breached, then you got to stop. And so, assuming that they followed the custom and practice of the industry, they definitionally were acting as reasonably prudent people in that profession. And if you're acting as a reasonably prudent person in your profession, you cannot be negligent. So if they were following all those procedures, there's probably no involuntary manslaughter here.
That's what I was thinking too. Does it change it at all whenever people like you heard, like George Clooney come out and Nicolas Cage come out being like, I'm shocked that this happened because we know, like George Clooney said, I've known ever since I started with, having a gun on a set that I look at it, I show everyone that I'm going to point it at. Nicolas Cage pretty much said everyone knows that if you're doing all this stuff, you're driving a car, you're riding a horse, you're operating a gun, you use it in the way that you would use it if you're out in the real world. And I thought the same type of thing. Whenever I heard people like that at that level say that, it's like, does that change at all when you have other high level people being like, well, that's not the protocol that we have heard about?
So it does in a very limited way. If it is good testimony to the fact that, in order to prove that you were acting as a reasonable person and you have to prove that you were following the custom and practice, then the next question is, well, what's the custom and practice? So people like George Clooney coming out and saying, yeah, that's what we do. I mean, that helps to establish that it is the custom and practice of the industry. Of course, you can probably find somebody somewhere an expert witness who will testify that they did something, that the custom and practice is something else. It just, at that point, it becomes a battle over the experts and who you're going to believe.
So if you had to make a prediction about this, would you say that it actually is something where we have charges, or it's something that's much more in the weeds type of lots of paperwork and just back and forth and fines and things like that?
I think this is going to be purely a civil matter. Barring, like Brian said, some sort of blockbuster moment in a deposition, or, OSHA is going to be investigating this as well because it was an it was a workplace injury, it was a workplace death. So, if they're investigating it and they if they uncover some sort of evidence that, something so wild was going on here, so outside the bounds of normal stuff, then you might see a criminal charge come from OSHA. That's really rare, but it happens. But, you'll see administrative fines probably. I mean, there was a death. It was pretty clearly there had to have been some form of negligence for a bullet to be there. So you'll probably see something like that. But criminally, I don't see. This is I think will be a purely civil matter.
Okay,
I agree with that. I think barring convincing the armorer to plead to some sort of misdemeanor just so they can say that something happened, I don't think any kind of criminal charges are really going to come about unless during this whole spaghetti pile of civil suits, somebody says something in a 3-hour deposition that they shouldn't say, or somebody goes on Instagram Live and says something they shouldn't say. Barring any sort of those kind of things that kind of jolt everybody to look at this from a criminal angle again, I don't think there's going to be any kind of criminal charges.
That's why all of his interviews that he was doing, all like the ABC interview, that's why that seemed very strange. Like it seemed like, are you getting yourself in trouble here? That seemed like a very strange move.
Well, and yeah, when I did criminal, that was the first thing I told my criminal clients for this short time I did criminal was just lay low. Like, do not talk to anybody about this. Don't post on social media. Like, just lay low until we get this all settled. We don't need you making any kind of statements or having words out there that the DA can see and get mad about. And so that is very strange that he would be kind of publicly addressing this as much as he has been.
And under the rules of evidence, those interviews are admissible. So,
Okay, I was wondering that too. Like, is that like whenever you have someone right there and they kind of, I don't know how it affects the actual, if you want to call it a case, whenever you have someone say like, I don't feel any guilt for what's going on. It's kind of like, how are these words? I don't know how these words are going to be used later. I would assume you don't know either. These are weird statements to be making.
Exactly. Even if you say something that's ambiguous, it could be turned against you, or you'll have to answer questions about it. And we don't like answering additional questions.
Well, outside of, I guess, just exactly the legalese of everything, as someone who is in the entertainment industry, lives in that world, how does something like this affect a high status person's career? This
is why God created publicists, to tell you how to deal with this. Right now, you lay low, you let people forget about it. You try to come out looking good, which he did, and that's what this is all about, or at least 78% of it is about trying to look good. But yeah, you can't really do anything. You probably go and do some volunteer work somewhere, something like that. Alec Baldwin is still a big star. It might ding him a little bit on if he can appear anywhere, if he's bankable or not for a little while. I probably wouldn't want him in a Western. But you probably take a pivot and do some completely different type of movie that doesn't even, you go to your outer space sci-fi thing, something that doesn't invoke this. You might never do a Western again. But
hey, he just went to Italy to do Christmas movies, is what he's doing right now.
Exactly. So you make a complete pivot on your subject matter. And the other thing, Alec Baldwin's, he's not gonna, he has television shows, lots of them, that he's getting residuals on. So it's not going to break him. He's going to make money for the rest of his life. He can afford to go and lay low. But I don't think he'll be he's not going to be the center guy on the middle of the movie poster using to sell your movie for a while. It much more reverberates, not for somebody like Alec, but for everybody else who worked on that's not Alec Baldwin. So, your producer, what's the cat's name? Ryan Smith. He's has some serious problems. Your armorer probably never works in this town again. Your armorer, she needs to go and work on as a range safety officer somewhere. Change your name, switch what name you go by. She's done. She'll never work in this town again.
Yeah, I think Nicolas Cage actually kicked her off of a set at one point because she was being irresponsible. So it's a bad narrative around her.
I mean, right now there is, but or she's being blamed very, very unfairly. But again, anytime anybody Googles you for the rest of your life, this thing pops up. I think she will. If it wasn't her fault, that it's going to be very hard for her to prove. There's already been a lot of judgment in the press. Her name's been sullied. It's going to be very hard for her to work. And there's very few armorers in this town to begin with. That's a very specialized profession, but there's a whole lot of people that would love to work in it. So it will be difficult for her to find work, I would think.
Unless there's somebody bigger that can be blamed for all this and she works out some kind of deal where she takes the fall in exchange for getting taken care of later. That could always not in the field of being an armorer, but in some other, she's just a mysterious production assistant on everything that gets made later.
I'm moving to Orlando working for medieval times. So I'm never touching a firearm again. I'll arm you with a lance. We can go ride horses.
Let's hope she just doesn't have a lance accent at some point. It's just
well, that would be very or a horse accent. That would be very problematic.
Well, Chris, is there any other comments on this whole fiasco? Any other angles?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of key takeaways. First, these things are rare. That's why they make such big news. These things happen incredibly rarely. You had the Twilight Zone accident in 1982. That was a horrible accident. Killed 3 people. 2 of them were children. The director on that was Michael Landis. He went on to a very, very successful career. The producer was this guy, you may have heard of him, called Steven Spielberg. He's had a very successful career. You had was it Knight Rider? What was the movie called?
Was it The Crow?
Midnight Rider. Midnight Rider. That you did see people go to jail. That's where you had the bed being put onto the active railroad bridge and the people performing on it and the train coming and killing them over, I think it was in Georgia. People went to jail for that. It was really bad. Yeah, that was bad. The producer went to jail on that. But okay, so there's your really examples of really reckless. Let's go perform on active railroad tracks. I know they're active. Let's just do it. But by and large, these accidents like this, they're pretty rare, and you don't see them very often anymore. I think the biggest reason for that is you have a union. You got to remember all of this, people have their takes on unions, but some unions that aren't very controversial are the entertainment industry unions, because they do a really good job of taking care of their people, and they've been around for a really long time. And the Screen Actors Guild, if the Screen Actors Guild has the ability to blacklist a production company. And so if people call into their safety hotline and say, I'm not doing this, they'll get investigated. So the unions have really helped to make sure that these places are safe. Dead actors aren't good for anybody. So, or cinematographers or anybody else. So I think these things are really rare. I think that's something that we lose sight of. But by their nature, they generally happen with somebody who has some notoriety, and it's Hollywood, so it's glitzy to report on it. But they just don't happen very, very often, or else they wouldn't be big news. Like a car accident, you hear about it for half an hour on the local news, and that's that. This isn't that. This is big time. So I think that's important to keep in mind, that they're really rare. Number two, the other thing that I would say is a good takeaway just for everybody across, no matter what your industry is. If you're a business owner, remember the three keys to liability protection. Remember your indemnity clauses when somebody's working for you. Remember remember to set up your LLCs to protect yourself personally, your personal assets, and remember why God created insurance at the end of the day. You carry insurance. That's all you can do as a business owner, and Hollywood's no different. One other thing I would also add was, people talk about this as a small film. It wasn't a big project. Okay, sure, but this thing had but it's been publicly reported, it had somewhere between a $6 and $7 million budget. They had 3 executive producers, 6 producers, 53 crew members, and 20 people on their cast. This is not a small operation. This is running a small, medium-sized business. So, at the end of the day, that's what all this is. It's a business. So it was like running an accounting firm in some ways.
But someone just had a gun.
And someone just happened to have a gun, and somehow a live bullet. The fact that there was a live bullet on the set is mind-blowing.
Well, and the fact that they were practicing with live ammunition the day before this happened.
If they were out there with prop guns, which let's be clear here, prop guns, that's a misnomer. These are real guns.
Yeah, they're all guns.
As props. Yeah, they're real. But if they were out there with picture weapons, the armorer, that's unbelievably negligent. It's unbelievable. It's unfathomable if that would be happening.
So if it came out that that's what was going on, then it's like, yeah, you guys go ahead. I'll check them later. Like, at that point, is that the type of thing where it's like, this might actually be on her?
Yeah, you're starting to look at something that would be outside of the custom and practice of the industry, allowing people to go and freelance with the picture weapons. Yeah, that would be that would be problematic.
Movie industry, insurance companies are going to start saying, you're going to do these safety protocols, you're going to run things this way, or we're not going to insure you and you're done. And so that might be something that comes out of this, is that the insurance companies will start saying, you want that insurance, you're going to do things the way that we say, because we're not paying out again.
It is called a takeover agreement, and they exist. Which gives the insurance company the right to come in and literally take over production of the film if they learn of something going on. You also have a completion bond, which says if something really bad happens on the set and you can't finish your movie, we have the right to come in here and complete it. I don't think that that's going to come into play here, because this movie it's unsellable at this point. So there's no value there to be had. But what you're talking about, a lot of things happen where they're doing it because it's a requirement of their insurance company. You see a lot of that, in E&O insurance, talking about, making sure you have all the rights and everything. You have to turn in a binder, and you have to go through 40 different things so you can get your E&O policy, say, yes, we did this, yes, we did this, yes, we did that. Now, that's not quite as insane as safety. What you see in the industry agreement and then in the insurance agreements are you agree to abide by certain industry policy or like we're going to be in compliance with SAG regulation 1440, blah, 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 blah. yeah, it's because of a lawsuit.
Well, Chris, thank you for taking the time to come on and talk about this. Brian, thank you also for coming on and talking about this. It's very, very insightful. It's a lot of points I had no idea about, but it makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad I was able to set it all up and connect you with somebody that I know that is industry veteran that could shed some light on this, because I've seen you've been doing a lot of content on it. So I said, let's get a couple lawyers on here to just kind of chew the fat on it.
Thank you all so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Support us for $5 a month on Patreon. Link is below. And as always, if you like these videos, subscribe to 5 Minute Critic for future updates on reviews and movie news.